Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Phenomena, a Paranormal podcast. And today marks officially our beginning of season 2. So, thank you for joining us again. And if you're just joining us for the first time, be sure to go back to the very beginning of our first season and check out all our podcasts. So, again, it has been a bit. We are back. We have gotten through all the turmoil of 2020.
Yes, for sure.
A little bit of turmoil. The election is past us. We're about to get our second round of vaccines for COVID very soon, next week.
Yes.
So we're getting back in our groove, and we thank you for your patience. And since this is the week leading into Valentine's Day, we thought we'd do something a little different today.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about tragic love losses that have led to hauntings or paranormal activity.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept because, we always have talked about briefly on here the concept of emotions feeding into haunted locations, specific hauntings. So what's a more powerful emotion than love?
Absolutely.
And so whether it's love gained or love lost, those are very powerful emotions to be pouring out into the atmosphere,
Right.
which either could feed or even create a haunted event.
Well, we talk about all the time how energy is really I think the marker for paranormal activity, and everything we do as human beings, generates energy and puts it out there into the atmosphere. So love is definitely a very powerful emotion that would generate a lot of energy that could go out there, whether we're alive or dead.
Right.
So without further ado, we have 4 stories that we're going to share with you. And then we have a little something special also at the end of all that.
Of course.
So I'm going to let Anthony start with the first story here today.
Yeah. Like we said, we have 4 stories here, and we will leave the link to this article that we found in the description below. So if you want to go back and reference any of this or read it or research it, that's totally on you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. But here we go. The first story of today is called The Bride on the Bridge. In Stowe, Vermont, lies a covered bridge they call Emily's Bridge. There are several versions of Emily's very sad, tragic tale to be told. Some versions say that Emily and her boyfriend were meeting at this bridge to run off together and elope. They wanted to get married, since her parents really did not approve of their relationship. Yet he never came, and she ended up hanging herself from a rafter. Another version says that Emily was left at the wedding altar and hopped on a carriage to find her love. When she reached the bridge, however, one of the horses was startled and she died in an accident. Yet another version says that she was killed by runaway horses on the way to her wedding. However you want to put it, the legend basically boils down to this. Emily reached a very tragic fate on this bridge. So visitors to the bridge have reported scratch marks on their cars and bodies, and strange noises like footsteps, the sound of a rope tightening as it's, someone being hung, a girl screaming even, which, would scare anyone who heard that. It's a very disturbing sound. So if you park your car on the bridge, you just might hear banging on the car or her body's feet dragging on the car's roof.
Now that one harkens back to that old urban legend, of course,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's much like a game of telephone.
Mm-hmm.
You have all these different versions of the tale because, if one isn't deemed scary enough, there's different versions added.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the feet touching the roof. I mean, that's a very classic urban legend. So I think, again, it goes to what fear we have ourselves that feeds into a paranormal situation.
It reminds me of a video that we saw of this bridge, ironically, of a haunting, where there's this rumor, a legend, that a woman had thrown her child
Oh, yeah.
over the bridge and then killed herself. And the legend was that she was haunting not only the bridge but the river itself, looking for her child, and that if you heard her scream, that was a sign of bad times to come.
Exactly.
And so there's this video of these paranormal investigators who went there to this bridge, and they actually heard a woman screaming before their car all of a sudden started blaring, like the alarm going off.
Right.
Even though the car hadn't been hit.
Right.
What it reminds me of is legends can fuel activity, I think.
I think so.
When so many people believe in something, even if it doesn't really exist, people's emotions can bring it to life. Kind of like the concept of, the rake.
The rake, yeah.
The rake's a very famous creepypasta kind of story where it's not real. It's not a real creature. But so many people have started to believe in it that you actually get videos and sightings of this creature.
That looks like the rake.
It looks we just saw one recently, that this creature in, I think it was Indonesia.
Right.
It looked like dead on for what the rake is supposed to look like. Now, of course, videos can be faked. That's not to say this video was 100% authentic, but the point is, people can create scenarios, creatures, hauntings with pure fear and emotion put into it.
Right.
And so that bridge is one example of it. And if this story has any credibility to it, it's that someone may have met a tragic end there, and so many people created this legend around it that it brought it to life.
Right. I really believe that. I think we've seen that in so many different cases, that there has to be some truth to that.
Yeah.
We talk about this all time with things like the rake, or, I think there's far less credence to Slender Man per se.
Mm-hmm.
But, black-eyed children, and, whether it's a famously haunted location that people go to investigate, when you're going in with an idea of all the activity that's supposed to happen there, and you get the same kind of activity, I think, you're going in, with that intention.
Yeah.
And intention is what spurs on a lot of activity. So, I think it's great. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But, I think we've all heard so many stories that sound very similar to this one about the bride.
Yeah.
And all different, countries and points of origin, where there was a bride who was stood up at the altar, and then she kills herself, and she's always coming back to look and wait for her, beau to come and finally get married. This is a very classic story.
A lot of stories, especially when, I've seen a lot of stories from England and countries like it or surrounding it,
right,
of, women who were supposed to be getting married to someone who ended up going off to war,
right,
or to fight a battle of some sort because it was that kind of age.
Yeah.
And they never came back. And so instead of moving on, they just supposedly sat and waited for as long as they could before their heart gave out of heartbreak.
Right.
That's a very iconic story that you see pop up all over the place, even if there's not any truth to it. But if so many people believe it, does it become true?
This is a very good question. And, this isn't on our list today, but just one of the, I guess, biggest tales that I can think of from my own heritage of an unrequited love that turns into a haunting is the urban legend of La Llorona.
I was thinking the same thing. That does involve a love story gone wrong, because
absolutely
the whole, we actually talked about it in our Latin American mythological figures episode. You guys can go back and listen to that. But the basic thing with La Llorona is the fact that she was a bride. She fell in love with this man. They got married, had 2 children. But she grew jealous of how much the husband kind of loved the children more than her. And so, in a moment of fleeting sanity, I guess, she drowned her children. And yet she became horrified at what she'd done and threw herself into the water and drowned as well. And so now the legend goes that she's constantly wailing and walking around looking for her children, and that if you're not careful, your children will be taken.
Right.
But it is a tragic love story that she loved this person so much who didn't reciprocate it enough to her, that she did something kind of horrible.
Right.
But it's been passed down for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Who's to say what the true origin of that legend is?
It's really hard to say. I mean, we've seen video of things in recent years in, the Latin American countries where, you're hearing the wailing and screaming of a woman.
I'll try and find the link to this video and put it in the description so you guys can see. There's one specific one.
Oh, yeah.
That a lot of you who are interested in this stuff probably have seen. Mm-hmm. But just piercing screaming that an entire town heard.
They stopped dead in their tracks what they were doing, and even the police came out and couldn't find the source of the screaming. So
the police found an old white dress left behind in this abandoned building where the screaming seemed to be centered around. And because they believe so heavily in this legend in these Latin American countries, the police were ordered to actually burn the dress to release the spirit.
Right.
Which, many investigators say burning an object is not going to do any
don't
good.
Do it.
Not burn an object.
Don't do it.
But in their culture...
the Supernatural TV series.
No. Don't get some rock salt and everything.
Yeah, you're all good.
But, they really do believe that down there. So they were ordered by the police, the chief of police, to burn this object.
Honestly, I've never seen a group of police officers so terrified in my life.
They were carrying the dress out on a stick, I believe.
They didn't even want to touch it.
No, so, this is how hard people believe in this stuff. And if that many people believe it so heartedly, is it really out of the realm of possibility that amount of energy can create that? Because Llorona really be rocking around because of how many people believe in her.
I mean, very possibly. That's one of the, like I say, a very, very old, handed down generation to generation legend.
Yeah.
That was actually used by the patriarchies and matriarchies and families to scare the living daylights out of kids. Mm-hmm. I mean, my own grandmother did that, and if you don't go to bed and do what you're told, La Llorona is going to come for you. Mm-hmm.
Even recent shows that we've watched, like The Outsider on HBO.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Even touch on this subject that there's a culture around every country in the world has a story of a creature who takes children.
Takes children or eats children, and there are several, and we even covered some of them when we did our Latin American podcast. So
like El Cuco.
El Cuco is the main one in The Outsider. Good show.
I highly recommend.
And for people who are into the paranormal, you'll love it. But anyway,
I know this is our Valentine's episode. We kind of always take a left turn somewhere.
Yeah, we're gonna get back on the road, I swear.
But the basic concept is this is a grand example of how emotion can create something. Yeah. And what's more powerful than a tragic end to a love story like that?
Absolutely. All right. Well, here we go. We're going to go to story number 2 now.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't take any more.
Stay with us, folks. We're still here.
We're off the rails. Let's just admit it. Okay. Yeah. All right. So here we go. This is a deathly love triangle. Those are always fun.
Oh, yeah.
Too many of those to be heard. Okay. The Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine, Florida, is the oldest masonry fort in the United States. The site itself is dripping with paranormal activity. But we're going to tell you right now about an affair that led to murder.
Yikes.
And sadly, these are all too true in daily life. So
we see this happen far too often in the news itself.
Every day.
So this is not necessarily just paranormal related. This is an actual event.
So in 1784, Colonel Garcia Marti brought his young wife, Dolores, to the fort. He wasn't the most devoted husband and often ignored his wife. Thus, she found other ways to spend her time. This is not good already.
I already see this.
Yeah, the writing's on the wall. Yeah. She began an affair with her husband's assistant. And again, you're going to have an affair, you're really going to go directly to your husband's assistant.
Kind of put some feelers out a little outside the circle.
Right. Well, they probably didn't have Tinder back then.
No, probably not.
Anyway, I digress. So she went to his assistant, Captain Manuel Abuela. Dolores wore a very unique perfume, which Garcia smelled on Manuel one day. Shortly after, Dolores and Manuel went missing.
Oh, no.
They weren't missing. Garcia told everyone that Dolores had returned to Spain and that Manuel had a special assignment in Cuba. About 50 years or so later, a hidden room was found in a dungeon behind a brick wall. The remains of a woman and man were found. Some versions say chained to the wall, and some other versions say in a pile of ashes. So I'm not sure how they could tell it was a man or a woman.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they had forensics then.
No.
So sightings of a woman with a white dress have been reported on the site. Could it be Dolores?
Here we go again with another
Lady in
iconic
white.
legend, the lady in white.
Yeah.
If it's not a lady in white, it's a lady in black.
Or lady in period dress.
Yes, of course, a period
Which is
dress.
always Victorian. There's no other periods.
No, only Victorians had the ghost sightings down.
Of course.
But, this goes to the fact that the lady in white is a very iconic haunted figure.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have a name here, Dolores, but if so many people will put their fear of this lady in white into the atmosphere in multiple areas, not just across this country, but around the world, could the lady in white actually be walking around this fort because so many people have heard the story?
Right.
To say the least, this is a very tragic love end. We've seen, like we said, we've seen it happen before all over the news. But young people will often meet tragic ends because of affairs, and it's really a tragedy to see unfold. I mean,
definitely,
especially because the whole thing started with an unattentive husband. Not saying it's right to have an affair, obviously, but violence is never the answer.
No,
violence is never the answer in these scenarios, and it creates, when you use violence like that, especially if they were chained to a wall in a dungeon like that.
Right.
Imagine the amount of anger, fear, self-loathing, all those emotions you have to be feeling after being left to rot like that.
Yeah.
Especially with someone you actually fell in love with right next to you. That's got to create a lot of charged energy in a very confined space.
Absolutely, and there's a lot that is unknown too, if you really think about it. If you're really playing devil's advocate here, if we had them chained in a dungeon, what's to say that he wasn't going in and out of that dungeon, torturing them, doing God knows what to get his revenge?
Yeah.
There is one culture, especially in particular, that they fully believe that, circumstances like that where there is like a violent loss, absolutely, their first thought is that it creates a lingering haunting that's like a violent or very, turmoil-ridden haunting. And that's the Japanese. They really believe that. I don't think any other culture, will see it any differently.
Bless you.
Yeah. I love laughing parties.
Yeah.
Excuse
Bless you. Well, this is live, people. At least we're not faking this.
Exactly. No, but, really when you think about it, that's what we talk about all the time, is the energy that you leave behind. What kind of residual energy is it? Is it positive or negative, tragic, violent? And is that, what sticks in the atmosphere afterward?
Well, obviously a lot of pop culture has adopted this, especially in Japanese culture, with films like, The Ring or The Grudge and everything. Young women especially who meet tragic fates in a very violent, heated way.
Right.
The concept of those films show that they are very violent hauntings as a result. But just because those are very exaggerated Hollywood style events doesn't mean there's not a basis of truth to them.
Yep.
And so the concept of people meeting tragic ends in such a grisly way, leaving such charged energy, even when we do spirit box sessions, we've heard this kind of stuff where,
absolutely,
we've heard victims identify themselves in our recordings, in our sessions. And we've heard people reliving their final moments. And it's very, heartbreaking. It's disturbing.
Oh, yeah.
We won't mention specific names because we're not really those kind of people to, you know.
Well, we don't have to mention their names, but just to give an example,
Yeah.
We had a murder, double murder,
Mm-hmm.
happen right down the street
From where we live.
from where we live.
It was before we moved here,
Right.
but it was right down the street.
It was less than a block away. That's how close.
And wasn't it like months apart?
Actually, yeah, it was two people, and they were related.
Yes.
And they were killed maybe 6 months apart
Mm-hmm.
at the same place, at the same location.
In the same manner.
In the same manner. And the execution style shot. And, it very much could have been drug related.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually did a session for a relative of these two people
Mm-hmm.
who wanted to reach out and see if they could contact them. And literally, you can hear the scenario of one of them playing out with, being told to get on their knees and, distressed begging, things like that.
And one of them had a child.
Yeah. That was in the apartment at the time.
You could hear them like begging for the child to be kept safe.
Right.
Which thankfully the child wasn't harmed in that scenario. But
it was very tragic.
The amount of fear they must have been feeling in those final moments left an imprint on the atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also, obviously we believe that, energy goes out to the collective consciousness and could always come back around if called upon, or someone thinking about it like we were in that moment, because we were trying to reach out on behalf of this family member. It's just, that amount of emotion clearly created a scenario where the tragic fate that they met left a really big imprint in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, I
remember
hearing the gunshot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too, which is disturbing yet unique, because that's not even a person's voice or emotion that you're hearing. That's the sound of what actually ended their life.
Yeah, that's what really, I think, gets to me, is the fact that we can hear something like that. Or recently on 2 different sessions, we've heard the very clear sound of glass breaking.
Oh yeah, it's very, distinctly.
Oh yeah.
If you've ever seen a television show where they show like glass shattering in slow motion, and you hear the sound of that glass breaking.
Yeah. We've
heard that twice, and this is not radio.
No.
That we're hearing. This is very distinctive, drawn out glass breaking.
Right.
There's also another scenario last year where we did a session, and another victim of someone who, had gone missing in our local area. We heard them having this discussion of being afraid because they had been taken.
Right.
And you can actually hear the howling of the wind that you would hear if you were in the middle of nowhere in the desert, which their remains have consequently been found last year. In the desert.
Right.
It's, like we said, it's disturbing. It's not always easy to hear, but it's a prime example of how emotion and violence can create a scenario where you can hear what they were going through.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, there are times when we hear stuff that, I wish that at that moment, like, we could just share with everybody. Yeah. But it's almost like, you have to be part of that experience to really get just how much it affects everything, the atmosphere, the fact that that kind of stuff is left behind. It's kind of mind-blowing, honestly. Yeah. Yes, we know we took another left turn.
We like to give context to a lot of these things, and we're very passionate about this stuff, so we always find a way to get off topic a little bit.
A little bit.
We have 2 more stories here. This third one is called A Forbidden Love. Minnie Quay was the 15-year-old daughter of James and Marianne Quay. They lived in Forester, Michigan, so they often saw boats coming in and out of town. Minnie fell in love with a sailor. Not much is known about him, sadly, and her parents disapproved of this crush that she had. One day, word came to town that his boat had sunk tragically, and Minnie was quite distraught, especially since her parents had forbidden her to say goodbye when he last left. Sometime after, she was babysitting her infant brother for her parents. She left her house and walked towards the waterfront. People near the town inn, the Tanner House, waved as she walked by. Suddenly, their friendly faces turned to horror as she walked into Lake Huron. Legend says that she still walks to the beach, waiting for her sailor to return. More frightening versions say she lures young girls towards the water and towards their deaths. Now, this is obviously a case where you can see that local legends, especially among teenagers, probably kind of amplify the haunting from, a tragic love loss to now she's going to lure people to their deaths,
Right,
kind of thing.
right.
But this also touches on something we had mentioned before, which is the young woman who was left waiting for their love to return,
Right.
tragically meeting her own end and is now left in the afterlife searching for that love still. It's like we said, it's tragic, and yet this is something you see happen all over the world. This is, especially water, is often involved in a lot of these stories too.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well.
Which, there is that whole notion that water can be something that amplifies the energy of a haunting.
Right.
Which is a unique concept, especially with so many stories involving young women who walk the beaches,
Yeah.
looking for someone that they
Right.
lost.
Well, even with, like we said, with La Llorona, it had involved water.
Yeah.
So, people, when they go out investigating, looking for her, they go to bodies of water and, try and go in with the intention of contacting her.
Yeah.
So, yeah, water definitely is a conduit.
Yeah.
So, again, another very tragic story of love loss leading to a haunting.
Yeah.
And often to a suicide, which in and of itself tends to generate a lot of hauntings.
Right.
So, yeah, very good one on that one. We're going to tell our last story and then go into our little bonus thing that we're going to have.
Yeah.
And this one is a romantic murder plot. Jesse Strang deserted his wife and children and began a new life in Albany, New York. He lived under a new name, Joseph Orton, and began working at the Van. Oh, I get the good long word. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Go for it. It's all yours.
Something. Oh, it's going to be in the story.
We'll read it for yourselves.
Yeah, there you go. Residence at Cherry Hill. He caught the eye of the affluent Elsie Van. That name, Rensselaer. It starts with an R.
Yeah.
A married woman. Jesse and Elsie decided their love could really flourish without Elsie's husband, John Whipple, around.
Oh, nice.
These people were scandalous.
Yeah.
In May of 1827, after a failed attempt of arsenic poisoning, Jesse Strang shot John Whipple. Jesse and Elsie tried to hide their murder plot. They didn't cover their tracks very well. Murder by Gaslight, which is a blog here, describes the sensational trial that followed. In June, Jesse Strang confessed to the murder and told prosecutors where to find the rifle. He believed that if Elsie was convicted as well, her powerful family connections would get them both pardoned, and he tried to lay the blame on her. But when his lawyer and the prosecutor told him that nothing he said against Elsie would lighten his punishment, he withdrew his confession. Members of the household testified that they had heard Strang spread stories of prowlers out to kill Whipple. I'm going to skip some of the trial detail here because I want to get to the haunting part. Jesse Strang was found guilty of first-degree murder, and Elsie Whipple was found not guilty. According to Albany tourist site, all members of this love triangle roam the halls of Cherry Hill. People have witnessed a ghost on the bottom floor of Cherry Hill and believe it is Mr. Whipple. He is not hostile, but gives off a feeling of anger. Jesse Strang's ghost is seen where the gallows once stood, wearing the same clothes he wore the day of his execution. Imagine repeatedly running into both your exes in the afterlife. That's pretty tragic.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, so it's no surprise to me that murders can lead to hauntings.
Yeah.
And there is one example that I can give before we get to our special detail. I know you know what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so obviously a very infamous case in recent years has been the case of Chris Watts, who murdered his wife and 2 very young daughters, along with their unborn son, because he wanted to have a new life.
Yeah.
And he had a mistress, and he was not happy about a new child of theirs coming into the world. Didn't probably want to have to pay child support for all these 3 kids. And he murdered his daughters first, before his wife Shanann came home.
Yeah, from a trip she had taken.
Right. There had been problems, and she knew there were issues, and she was, calling him out on those issues. And so I think he spent that whole weekend that she was gone with his mistress. So I just read something today that disturbed me even more about the case, which is that he didn't just kill his daughters once, but killed them twice. And when I say that, apparently he choked them and thought they were dead, but they had just passed out. So when he was in the middle of killing his wife, Shanann, the older daughter had woken up and came walking into the room.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea about this.
And then, came to find out the youngest also woke up. So when he took the girls and took the wife to where he was going to dispose of the wife's body, he smothered the girls again and then threw them in the oil tank.
Oh my gosh.
And this is his words, to make sure that they didn't wake up again. So this was a very depraved man.
Yes.
A terrible murder. The thing is that there has been very widely circulated video that came from police body cams when they came and they were searching the house.
Which is a good thing to point out
Yes.
right away, because this is not paranormal investigators going to the homes shortly after this tragedy. This is police footage,
right,
from when they were first looking for the girls and the mother.
Exactly.
Before they even knew that he had killed them. Obviously.
Right.
They even have him on the camera
yes, at one
being
point.
interviewed.
Yeah, and I mean, we might have to link these two, because this is some of the most bone-chilling stuff I've seen when it comes to EVPs and even seeing figures and different things.
Yeah.
And what happened when he was standing next to the TV even. But they had, they heard the voice of Shanann, very, very heated sort of argument type of thing. And she, I don't think, was happy about people being in the house, because they were coming to search, and she's, saying very audibly, this is our house. Laughing of the little girls. Just a lot of things that really is very audible, but not to them at the time.
Even
the
the
person, on the recording.
When the laugh was heard, it was in Shanann's closet.
Right.
And the person whose camera was being used, the police person, had a dog with them. That's what they were leading the dogs through the house to try and find their scent.
Right.
And when they stepped in the closet, the woman had heard it.
Right.
She heard the laugh and thought that she must have stepped on a toy of one of the kids or something. And they were walking around trying to recreate it, and they couldn't find it. Now, they're not paranormal investigators, so they just kind of left it alone.
Yeah, but you could tell they were shook.
Yeah, they definitely heard it. They didn't know what to think of it, because when you're looking for missing people, who sits there and thinks about ghosts?
Right, exactly. They're just looking for real life. And there was another incident when a neighbor had reported seeing lights on upstairs in the house and movement.
Yeah, this was a few months after, I think, of the conviction.
Or something along those lines. And they came in, and you can see in this footage that while a police officer is upstairs, that there is a shadow in the shape of a small child right behind him.
Who peeks around the officer.
Right. It's very clear. And this, again, is police footage.
Yes.
It's not anyone else's, but body cam footage. So aside from that, in one of the interviews that happened right when they were just missing and they're interviewing the husband, and this was in one of the documentaries, I think, on Netflix, that he's standing right next to a TV when they're questioning him, and something comes up on the screen that is very interestingly timed, where it just shows, a uterus and almost like a giant sonogram with a fetus inside,
Mhm.
and then a skull that kind of flashes across the screen.
Yeah.
And it was the synchronicity of it in the line of questioning that they were doing seemed very suspicious. In that was Shanann trying to use that to.
You could see the reaction on his face.
Absolutely. When he looked and saw that on the TV, it really terrified him. You could tell.
And, you know, obviously, I don't care about his feelings because
No.
he did a terrible thing.
Right.
But it's just the fact that because he knew he did kill them, he recognized why that was significant.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
you could see the terror on his face.
Right.
Um,
And if what we believe is true, and the energy left behind by his wife was very much present, I mean, it would not shock me for her to try and manipulate something to say, hey, this is what's happened.
yeah.
We do really feel like the energy is able to communicate with us, you know, through spirit box or what have you, because they can manipulate energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that is just, you know, such a horrific case. But the footage that came afterwards was really, I think, telling for the paranormal community.
Yes. I mean,
so
it's a prime example that I think needs to be looked at no matter how tragic it is. Because of the sheer fact that it was not used from a paranormal investigator themselves.
Or edited in any way.
No, this was released by the police department.
Yep.
To the general public for, not for ghosts, but for the fact that they wanted transparency in their investigation.
Right.
So the fact that this stuff was caught on unedited police footage lends a huge amount of credence
Mm-hmm.
to the concept of these tragic victims being left behind at this house, of
Right.
being, you know, haunting this location. That's their home.
Right.
I mean, no matter what happened to them there, no matter how tragic it is, she loved her children and she loved her home.
Right.
She lived and breathed everything for those kids.
Yeah.
So no matter how tragic it is not shocking to think that she is protecting her children in her home.
Absolutely.
You know, no matter the fact that they're no longer there physically.
Yeah.
She's gonna tell them, hey, this is our home.
Yeah. That was a heartbreaking one.
It was.
Well, we're going to shift gears real quick.
Yes.
And one of the things that we have looked at, experimented with, tried to figure out what works and what isn't, is some of the apps for ghost hunting that are on our phones. And we have never been big proponents for a lot of these apps. We prefer to use, you know, actual equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, you know, obviously that is my primary focus when it comes to doing any investigating. But, you know, because, you know, we like to be objective,
Mm-hmm.
as, you know, we have, you know, seen certain ones that have been used out in the field, and we say, okay, well, let's try this and see how this goes.
Yeah. Not really expecting anything.
Right.
But we try and keep an open mind, but be, you know, objective at the same time.
Right. And I mean, one of the more popular ones, what is it? The necro. We have it. What's it called? We should know this by heart.
Necrophonic.
Necrophonic. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's one of the more popular ones that, you know, people tout. We've tried that. For me, there's a lot of added bells and whistles that sort of, you know, doesn't feel as realistic.
Yeah, there's like
to
a
me.
reverb effect and echo
Right.
effect, that kind of stuff, and it kind of distorts
Right.
what they're saying is supposedly coming through.
Exactly. So that's not one of my personal favorites.
No.
Obviously, you know, people out in the field will use an Ovilus, and this is, you know, very similar to a lot of ones that we've looked at that are apps. And, you know, yes, there are preloaded libraries on there.
Yeah.
The idea is that, you know, spirits can use those and pull from those to communicate with you.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have an Ovilus, so, you know, we have like just different apps that operate that way. And there is one that we have come across that we will use in conjunction with our spirit box, our SB7. to see if we get any sort of correlation in what we're hearing. And this particular app, I will say, has come across with some things that have really actually surprised us.
Yeah.
And have echoed what we're hearing on the spirit box.
Yeah, like we said, it's hard when you're dealing with something like the Novulus because of the preloaded words in it. You always worry that because the words are preloaded, maybe the person behind it kind of rigged it so that certain words would come through at certain times.
Right.
You always worry about that stuff, but we always keep an open mind and we test these apps specifically to see if that is the case.
Right. And I will say that in the grand scheme of things, we're not getting a lot of repetitive, preloaded words or phrases that keep coming.
There are a lot of names and words that come through that are really out there.
Right.
And there are even times where, when you see this on the videos on YouTube or whatever of this app being used, it's usually just one word. We get a lot of sentences.
Yeah, phrases and really specific to me personally. There is a nickname that my father called me my whole life. And I have actually caught him in his voice, referring to me by my nickname on our SB7.
Right.
Many times. Like when he comes across, that's what he's going to say.
Yeah.
To get my attention. And this particular app actually had that come up, and it's not a common name.
No, it's not a common name at all.
At all. So that's what kind of struck me, that this is coming through, and this is completely not a common name at all that I would even expect to be in a library.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. So what we wanted to do is tell you this is the Spirit Talker app.
We'll put a link down below along with all the other links today. If you want to test it out for yourself, if you want to download this app, it's a few dollars. It's not super expensive.
Right.
And just see for yourself if this is something you think works. We're not here to say with 100% certainty that this is something that works.
Right.
This is just the app that happens to have the most credibility, I think, with it actually being a functional use, because we've backed it up with things that we've heard on the Spirit Box,
right,
which we have gotten a lot of evidence from, and we've tested out quite a lot. We've also had a few EVPs in the past as well, kind of line up with things that have come up on this app. So we're going to test it out today. Yeah,
we're going to play it for you so you can see what it sounds like. I'll have Anthony maybe ask a couple questions and see if we get any responses.
We're on location right now, not at a specific place. We're kind of in the parking lot of some local area. So we don't know who could be wandering around.
Yeah.
The reality is people have passed away in most spots around this world.
Of course.
So you never know who could be around. And we're not even saying that anything significant is going to come through right now.
Yeah.
But we wanted to give you a little taste of what the app sounds like and how it works. And then give you the option, if you want to test it out for yourself, let us know. And if there are other apps that maybe we don't know about that you have had some success with utilizing other equipment along with it, let us know.
Yes,
in the comments below. Let us know, tweet to us, Instagram, whatever. But here we go. This is the Spirit Talker app. It also has a EMF function as well.
Right.
So it will read EMF readings for you as you're doing this. So here we go.
All right, here we go. And what it does is it'll scan. It's listening. Mm-hmm. And when it comes up with something, it's going to audibly, you'll hear what it has to say.
And we don't really like to ask leading questions that, we think maybe if this is a smart device, maybe it'll hear the question and be able to come up with the answer that's obvious.
Right.
We try and leave it very open-ended so that we can see what's happening. Carl. See? We haven't even asked a question yet, and the name Carl came up. You know what's funny? We're right across from Carl Jr.
Yeah, that's true. That is kind of funny.
That's kind of we're not saying that's why Carl came up. It's just a funny...
Yeah, funny coincidence.
Yeah, Carl Jr. is staring at us right now.
All right.
So,
do you want to ask a question here?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. If there are any presences, any energies, any people in the area near us. We have a device here in Christina's hand. My name is Anthony. If you want to try and direct your energy into this device, or speak directly into it, and see if maybe you can tell us who you are.
Okay.
Trapped here.
So there you go. You hear that? That says trapped here. That's a full phrase right there. Okay, whoever you are, I'm very sorry to hear that you're trapped here. If we can help you at all, maybe you can start by telling us your name. Is it Carl?
We're just giving it a chance to respond here.
Yeah.
It's much like the spirit box. Sometimes we'll get a delayed response from a question we asked.
Okay.
Joseph.
Okay. I'm going to address you as Joseph, if that's your name, and thank you for speaking to us. What?
It was weird. It kind of hesitated like it was listening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joseph, how did you come to be here? Can you tell me
what happened to you?
What happened to you? Yeah, we're not going to do a long session because, as you can tell, there's a lot of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give them enough time to really pour their energy out just to get a word, let alone a phrase, to respond to us. So, and you never know if you're dealing with nanny. Well, okay. We know nannies usually are for children. Joseph, how old are you?
The other thing I like about this app, as compared to some others, it shows you a list. It keeps track of what it's saying right on your screen, but it doesn't just go away once you're done.
Yeah.
It keeps it in a folder by date. So right here at the bottom right of my screen is the word folder, and you hit that and it'll bring up all the folders from your sessions, so you can go back and go over the different things that were said.
Which is good, because when you're trying to understand who you're speaking to, possibly, it really does help to have that information on hand.
Especially if you use it also with your spirit box.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back and listen to the spirit box session and then have this information visually to correlate with.
Yes.
So I really liked that feature.
It's all about backing up your evidence.
And then we get a different Carl,
Carl.
spelled with a K instead of a C.
Which, if you've been listening to our podcast at all, we always bring up one of our favorite investigations and investigator teams, which is the Hellier crew.
Right.
Who, the director of that series and the kind of technical side of the investigators is Carl Pfeiffer.
Right.
Spelled with a K.
Carl with a K.
Obviously, we're not saying that has anything to do with him right here. But, we always look for synchronicities, too. When we do investigations, synchronicities, when they're at their highest, tend to show that there's a lot of activity in an area. Highly recommend you guys look into the synchronicity concept.
Oh, yeah.
If you are ever looking for something to research, because we have definitely found a lot of that in our investigations.
Yeah, you can really go deep diving on that for sure.
Is there someone named Carl here?
Injury.
Okay. We had asked what happened to them. We asked Joseph specifically what happened to him here.
Right. And we have to keep in mind something, too. Aside from there being like a delay sometimes in our answers, and you might get other things come up before you get an answer to a question, that largely can relate to the fact that you're not just maybe hearing or communicating with one person at any one given time.
Yeah.
When you think about the number of people who have passed on in any given vicinity or place and time, we get this a lot on our SB7. I mean, we have a very active location.
We have someone who participates in our investigations a lot that is very highly sensitive
yes.
to energy and especially in the paranormal field, they do SD sessions, and it can actually see people and events in their mind's eye.
Gravestone.
Gravestone.
Okay.
But they often feel like when they're doing these sessions that there are people kind of surrounding them, hovering around them.
Right.
For all we know, sitting in this car in this parking lot right now, there are going to be people surrounding the car,
Right.
trying to get our attention, trying to speak to us. So we never know who at any given time could be saying these words.
Especially when we're using equipment to initiate communication,
Mhm.
where it's like you're just opening this door and everyone's ready to come through.
Yeah.
Hold on one sec.
Crime.
Crime.
We'll have to do some research maybe
On
on this
area.
parking lot in particular to see if there's been any crimes, especially recently. But
I think I'm going to shut it off now. Just
Yeah.
we wanted to give you that example. Thank you to anyone listening who's communicating.
yes,
We appreciate that.
we will be back in this spot at another point. So if you ever want to come talk to us again, be sure to look out for us. My name's Anthony, and this is Christina. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
So there you go.
So there's the Spirit Talker app, and we will link that as well. And we just always like to keep an open mind about different things and try it out. And believe me, there have been ones we've tried out that were like, no, this is just kind of preloaded garbage.
Yes.
So
A lot of wasted money.
yes.
I mean, there's especially a couple of very popular YouTubers who aren't paranormal activity kind of people, but they've done videos in the field because it's gotten popular.
Right.
And they created an app, and we just sat there going, "Are you serious?"
Yeah.
I mean, it literally was just beeping at you because
Right.
you touched the screen, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So
So, yeah, it's interesting, but at any rate, we're going to be doing an interesting upcoming podcast.
a couple
and
of them actually.
A couple, yeah. So,
We wanted to kind of give you the topics ahead of time because we'd love to hear from you guys.
absolutely.
If you have any personal information or cases that you know of, or even if you've been involved in any of this stuff, please feel free to email us, send us a message on Twitter or Instagram, direct message us, Facebook. All our links are down below. Please feel free to follow us there and reach out to us because
Absolutely.
whether you're in the field yourself investigating or you're just someone who's listening, a casual listener who happened to have an experience, we'd love to hear from you. So, we're going to be discussing unidentified submerged objects.
Yeah, we found this very fascinating.
We all know UFOs. We know unidentified flying objects, which we will cover a lot in the years to come. But we heard about this phenomena that goes along with it called unidentified submerged objects, and this is basically objects or crafts that have been seen underwater.
Or in the footage we saw recently was seen flying very high speeds as a UFO and then diving into the ocean, and not just diving and staying down there, but then re-emerging with yet another craft.
Which,
So-
and the interesting thing about that footage was that they noted that it didn't, when it went into the water, it didn't splash.
No.
It didn't leave a splashing effect. So it almost looked like it phased
Into
into
water.
the water without affecting it physically.
I'll go you one better. The more interesting thing about that footage was that it was government footage.
Yes.
This wasn't some casual person out filming at their day at the beach.
No, this was a
This
government,
was- yeah.
military
Military
operative.
footage. Much like the more recent UFO military footage that the Pentagon finally had to acknowledge recently
Mhm.
after it being brought to light by Tom DeLonge's group. So
Yes.
this is something that, is a little hard to debunk.
This
So-
is something we were originally going to try and talk about today, but we really want to research this heavily.
Right, we want to dig in.
And we also want to give the opportunity for anyone to come forward if they have their own story or just a case that they're interested in,
If they have this a sighting that they had,
a video,
Right.
whatever.
we'd be very interested to hear it.
Yes, that's the first thing we're going to be talking about in the weeks to come. The other thing we are going to talk about is something we've talked about briefly in other episodes because it kind of touches on a lot of different things. But we're going to be talking about the missing 411 phenomena.
Right.
anyone who knows this, it kind of got coined Missing 411 by an investigator named David Paulides. He has a series of books that have come out. He has his own YouTube channel. He's done some documentaries.
A lot of other YouTubers have done stories on this.
Yes, there are areas all around the country. It's mostly woods.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely something directly related to the woods for the most part.
Right, mountain ranges.
There's been a couple that have been on islands, but the islands are covered in woods as well.
Right.
But they're called clusters because a lot of people have mysteriously disappeared in these areas.
And either they've disappeared completely or they've disappeared and then returned under very similar suspicious circumstances.
Or have been found dead.
Right. Or unexplained circumstances. I mean, bizarre cases.
We're talking about sometimes bodies have been found with clothes folded next to them.
Right.
They've been found in areas that are inaccessible by humans. This is a lot of stuff that happens at once. And there's a lot of research that's going to be going into this. So we also wanted to give you, the listener, an opportunity. If you have a story involving the missing 411, if you know someone personally, you have a case that you're interested in, or there's an area you live by that is known for these cases, please let us know. Come forward. Email us, message us. Let us know what you think of the missing 411 phenomena, and we'll maybe feature you. And anyone who comes forward, you don't have to be named. We won't name you if you do not want to be named.
Right. You can remain anonymous.
If you do want to be named, we can give you a shout out, whether it's shouting out your Twitter handle, whatever. We'll give you credit.
Absolutely.
We just want to hear your story, and we want to discuss this very interesting and kind of scary phenomena.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I run a missing persons podcast as well.
Yes.
Because we have an unusual amount of bizarre missing persons cases in our area.
It's called Missing in the Desert if you want to go subscribe.
Thank you. I wasn't going to give myself a shout out, but I appreciate it.
Of course.
But one of those cases, actually, aside from the intrigue of the case itself, it also is in a mountainous area. Mm-hmm. And there has been no sign of this man, and it is in very strange circumstances. Mm-hmm. So, I always often wonder about the possibility of a 411 case with him. So that is something that, we can talk about more when we do it. But
the reason why this is going to be featured on our podcast too, it doesn't just involve the people going missing themselves, it's the circumstances around it.
Well, no.
You have people who have reported cryptid sightings.
Mm-hmm.
Of strange creatures that have lured them there or have protected them from something else. There have been UFO sightings.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, these areas where the people go missing also always happen to be in clusters of increased paranormal activity, mm-hmm. Cryptid sightings, and UFO sightings.
Of course.
So, and when we talk about some of these cases, you'll see how bizarre they are.
Mm-hmm. You'll
see why the paranormal factor, comes into play.
There's also the very human aspect of it because,
yes,
everyone always thinks the UFOs, the cryptids, the paranormal, that's what you should be afraid of. But we've always said the thing you should be afraid of most is the human mm-hmm. threat, the human concept. Because we want to encourage people to not be afraid of the paranormal outright. Just like humans, there are good and there are bad to everything.
Right.
There are good spirits and negative spirits. There are good cryptids and bad cryptids. Good aliens, bad aliens.
Yeah.
But what you should be afraid of the most are the bad humans, the people who have intent to harm you. There's a lot of reports of cults, a lot of cult activity, a lot of drug-related and cartel, criminal organization related activity in these areas where people have gone missing. So it's all the interesting concept of it is that it's all kind of converging in one area.
Right.
What is it about these areas that draws all of this activity to it?
Right, exactly. That's what you have to ask yourself. And we're going to dive into it pretty hard. So something we've wanted to talk about for a while.
Yes.
So those are two things you have to look forward to in season 2.
Yep.
And hopefully that's going to be within the next week. We'll have one of those up.
Yeah.
So do stay tuned. Bookmark us, save us, share us, send us stories, ask us questions, because we're always open to all of it.
And those are only our first 2 subjects of season 2. So if you have any other suggestions, things you'd be interested in us researching or talking about, let us know as well.
Absolutely.
But we hope you enjoyed our season 2 premiere. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, please hold on to those loved ones.
Yes.
As our story showed, life can turn on a dime.
Yes, life can be tragic, but it can also be beautiful, as we all know. And love is a central part of that. So
enjoy your holiday, and we will be back soon. And thanks for listening, as always.
Good night, everyone, and we'll see you next week.